What kind of father signs away his own son's future and makes sure the entire world sees it? In an explosive act that has stunned the globe, King Charles has just signed a private royal decree removing Prince Harry from the royal line of succession permanently. The Crown has declared it will no longer be associated with what it calls betrayal, falsehood, or disloyalty. And Meghan? She reportedly went into a rage after reading the document. What drove the king to this unprecedented decision? Why now? And what does this mean for Archie and Lilibet, who may have just been erased from royal history? This is the story of power, punishment, and the end of royal blood ties. Stay with us. The silence inside Buckingham Palace had never felt heavier. Not since the death of Queen Elizabeth II had the royal corridors felt so suffocating, so electric with tension, so thick with the echoes of a decision that would shake the very lineage of the British monarchy. But this was not the quiet of mourning. This was the silence that follows after a ruler has made a choice so colossal, so irreversible, that it no longer needed announcement. The world would soon know. The signatures had dried. The damage had been calculated, and the consequences were already beginning to unfold. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For decades, the British monarchy has held tightly to the illusion of invincibility, a kingdom of iron tradition, stone-faced discretion, and blood-bound unity. But all of that, it seems, began to fracture the moment Prince Harry turned his back on the crown. Now, in an unprecedented and thunderous move, King Charles III has severed that bloodline connection, disowning his own son with a private royal decree that has since been leaked to the global press. According to multiple sources close to the palace and legal experts who've reviewed the document, the decree is not merely symbolic. It is a carefully worded, officially sanctioned, and deeply personal declaration that removes Prince Harry from the line of royal succession, effective immediately. He will no longer be known as a working royal. His name, reportedly, will be stricken from internal orders of succession, digital archives, and ceremonial documentation. This is no longer the Sussex saga. This is a royal termination, a constitutional bombshell, a father disinheriting his son in the most devastatingly public and final way imaginable. The leaked passage reads with a kind of surgical coldness: the crown cannot be associated with betrayal, falsehood, or disloyalty. In the interest of the monarchy's stability, integrity, and future, the House of Windsor shall move forward without the Duke of Sussex in the line of succession. What's striking is not just the words, but the tone. It isn't the voice of a father. It's the voice of an institution protecting itself from internal contamination. For the first time in modern British history, a reigning monarch has issued a decree that privately and now publicly strips their direct blood heir of any future to the throne. It is more than a slap in the face. It is a constitutional decapitation. But how did we get here? Rewind the clock to just a few short years ago, and Prince Harry was still walking behind his grandmother's casket, holding his father's hand, making appearances alongside his brother William, and speaking about duty, even while visibly conflicted. He was called the spare, yes, but never the exile. He was troubled, not treasonous. His departure from the royal family was controversial, yet it had the aura of sadness, not warfare. Even the Queen herself, in her final public comments on the matter, extended her love and said Harry and Meghan would remain much-loved members of the family. But as time went on, the tone changed. So did the strategy. From Oprah to Spotify, from Netflix docuseries to published memoirs, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle didn't just walk away from the monarchy, they dragged it into the mud of global headlines. Accusations of racism, of emotional neglect, of institutional cruelty were made under the bright lights of international television. And every new media appearance seemed to push the envelope further. The once proud prince now spoke like a man at war with the very crown he was born to serve. And yet, even as royal courtiers fumed behind closed doors, the palace itself remained silent, controlled, calculated. The motto remained, never complain, never explain. Until now. Sources inside Clarence House report that King Charles agonized over the decision for months. He reportedly consulted legal advisors, constitutional historians, and senior aides about the implications of such a decree. Would it backfire? Would it make Harry a martyr? Or worse, a rogue prince untethered from restraint? But according to one anonymous royal aide, what ultimately pushed the king to sign was not public image, but private betrayal. There are things the public does not know, the aide said. But what the king does know, what he has seen and heard from his own son, left him with no choice. This isn't about scandal anymore. It's about survival. In the deeply hierarchical world of the British monarchy, survival doesn't just mean public approval. It means ensuring the line of succession remains untainted, respected, and functional. And for King Charles, a monarch still navigating his relatively fresh reign after decades as heir apparent, allowing Prince Harry to remain even technically in the line of succession may have been seen as an unacceptable threat to that stability. Which brings us to the present, where lines are no longer blurred. They've been cut entirely. Across the Atlantic, in Montecito, California, the news reportedly landed like a bomb. Meghan Markle, insiders claim, erupted upon hearing of the leak. Not only because of what the decree meant for Harry, but because of what it meant for their children, Archie and Lilibet. Though born into a transatlantic mix of celebrity and royalty, the children now face a future with no official titles recognized by the monarchy and no formal place in the Windsor lineage. Meghan had fought hard for those titles. She had spoken publicly about their importance. And now, with a single signature from King Charles, it was all gone. But the pain, observers note, may run deeper for Prince Harry himself. For all his critiques of the institution, for all his stated desire to protect his family and live authentically, Harry has always seemed emotionally tethered to the monarchy. He spoke often of his love for his grandmother, of his pride in military service, of the internal conflict between duty and self-preservation. Now, that conflict has found its brutal conclusion. He is no longer a soldier of the crown. He is not even a prince with promise. He is a man without a throne. This story is not simply one of royal drama. It is a story about identity, legacy, and the limits of forgiveness. For years, the British people have watched their royal family evolve, sometimes too slowly, sometimes too dramatically. But never before have they witnessed a father and son sever their bond in such a deeply historic and devastating way. The question now is, what happens next? Will Harry speak out? Will Meghan retaliate with legal action or a televised statement? Will Charles face backlash for appearing to exile his own son at a time when the monarchy is already under scrutiny from younger generations and global critics? Or will this moment be the final line in a chapter too long and too bitter to salvage? In the coming hours and days, the world will look to Buckingham Palace for answers. But don't expect a press conference. Don't expect confessions. The monarchy rarely moves with noise, but when it does act, its silence speaks louder than any scream. One thing is clear. The days of speculation are over. The king has spoken, not with a microphone, but with a decree. Not in anger, but in finality. Prince Harry, once the beloved son of Diana, once the spare to the heir, has now become the forgotten prince. His future, politically, emotionally, and dynastically, has just been rewritten. And for the British monarchy, it seems, there is no turning back. The weight of a crown is not measured only in gold or duty, it's also measured in silence, in sacrifice, and in what a monarch must sometimes surrender to protect the realm. In the case of King Charles III, the heaviest burden may not be ceremonial. It may be personal. This is not just the story of a monarch defending the monarchy. It is the story of a father watching his son, once a symbol of pride and resilience, become the most volatile liability in royal history. And in that transformation, a choice had to be made. The final straw had been plucked from the strained thread that barely held father and son together. To understand the magnitude of King Charles's decree, one must look back at the slow erosion of trust between the two men. The rupture did not happen overnight. It unfolded like a tragedy in stages, each moment seemingly manageable in isolation, but collectively overwhelming when viewed as a whole. The real breaking point, according to Palace insiders, wasn't the Oprah Winfrey interview. Nor was it the Netflix docuseries, the podcast Jabs, or even Harry's controversial memoir. It was a much quieter betrayal, one never captured on camera or leaked to the press until now. There have been whispers in court circles for months that King Charles had been handed a dossier of private correspondences between Prince Harry and international producers. Communications that went far beyond creative content and veered into the realm of private royal business. Allegedly, Harry had been offering behind-the-scenes anecdotes involving the king's reign, the queen consort's behavior, and even private security protocol in return for financial compensation and production deals. Though these allegations remain under scrutiny, insiders confirmed that once King Charles reviewed the material in private, he emerged from his study visibly shaken. It was the first time the king looked at his son and saw a threat, not a wayward soul, one palace aide recalled. He stood at the window for nearly 20 minutes. No words. Just stillness. That's when we knew something irreversible had happened. To understand the gravity of that moment, one must remember who Charles is beneath the crown. For decades, he waited in the shadows as the longest-serving heir apparent in British history. He endured public humiliation through his divorce from Diana, carried the weight of expectation with a silent fortitude, and assumed the throne at an age when most men begin retirement. Through it all, he was a father to William, the future of the monarchy, and to Harry, the unpredictable spirit with a wounded heart. Charles tried to be both king and caregiver. But in the end, the demands of one role finally canceled the other. The final straw may have been emotional, but it was not irrational. It was grounded in duty. Charles had witnessed the slow unraveling of royal mystique under a global spotlight turned hostile. Each time Harry and Meghan opened their mouths, more of the firm's inner workings were exposed to public judgment. The problem wasn't just bad press. It was a kind of reputational decay. Slowly, the public was being trained to question the monarchy not by Republicans or politicians, but by the bloodline itself. To a monarch, this is not criticism. It's corrosion. There is, of course, the matter of precedent. The royal family has weathered scandals before: the abdication of Edward VIII, the divorces of Princess Anne and Prince Andrew, even the fallout from Princess Diana's explosive interview. But never before has a reigning monarch needed to officially disinherit a direct heir without criminal conviction, exile, or public disgrace. What makes Harry's case unique and dangerously modern is that he didn't disappear. He didn't fall into oblivion. He stayed relevant. He turned rebellion into a brand. It is that brand, more than anything, that terrified the crown. Unlike Edward VIII, who faded into the periphery after his abdication, Harry turned his exit into an ongoing series. First came the Oprah tell-all, with shocking claims of racism and suicidal thoughts. Then came the Netflix series, slick, visually intimate, and dripping with grievances about life behind palace walls. Then came the memoir, Spare, which offered painful and in some cases inflammatory details about drug use, sibling rivalries, physical fights, and alleged emotional neglect. The Sussexes didn't just leave the royal family. They launched a rival narrative. For King Charles, the pain was deeply personal. Friends say the monarch would often watch these interviews not with anger, but with confusion and heartbreak. He could not understand how his son, whom he'd walked with through tragedy, whom he'd supported through military service, and whom he loved despite their differences, could reduce their shared history to anecdotes and profit. Behind palace doors, Charles reportedly asked, "Why wasn't love enough?" The royal court had a different question: how long can this go on before it destroys the institution? It was that tension now, between personal grief and public responsibility, that created the crucible from which the royal decree was forged. Charles, who had once been criticized for emotional distance as a father, now found himself accused of acting out of too much emotion as a king. But those close to him insist the decision was anything but impulsive. In fact, it was strategic. According to sources, the king held a private council earlier this year in Sandringham. Present were senior legal advisors, royal historians, his private secretary, and the Archbishop of Canterbury in an advisory capacity. The goal was not to punish Harry, but to protect the monarchy. They reviewed historic cases, constitutional limits, and global legal frameworks. Could a king remove a son from succession without an act of parliament? The answer, they concluded, was yes, if it was a matter of internal royal protocol, not national constitutional law. The decree was then drafted in absolute secrecy. Printed on embossed vellum, signed in crimson ink, and sealed with the monarch's personal signet, it was designed not to go public. Its leak remains a mystery, though theories abound. Some believe a senior courtier intentionally allowed it to surface, believing the public had a right to know. Others think it was leaked by someone within Harry's camp, seeking to spin the narrative before it became fully weaponized by palace press. Regardless of how it emerged, the message is now clear: Harry's place in the monarchy is no more. Charles, always the reluctant disciplinarian, finally acted not as a father, but as a sovereign. And in doing so, he made history. Those who have spoken with the king since the decree's publication describe a man at peace but not at ease. He reportedly still refers to Harry as "my boy" in private, and Camilla has told friends that Charles grieves every day, but knows he had no other choice. The tragedy, she allegedly said, is that he's lost a son twice. Once to America, and now to consequence. One must ask, was this inevitable? Could a different path have prevented this rupture? Could reconciliation have happened if both sides had paused, listened, forgiven? Possibly. But what's certain is this. In every monarchy, there comes a moment when tradition is challenged and survival is chosen over sentiment. For Charles, that moment has come, and he chose survival. What now lies ahead is uncharted territory. A monarchy without Harry, a royal family missing one of its most recognizable faces, and a king who must rule with the knowledge that in protecting the crown, he may have destroyed what remained of his family. It is one thing for a royal rumor to swirl through the media, unconfirmed and elusive. It's another entirely when the very source of that rumor is a document. A physical decree, signed and sealed by the sovereign, and then leaked in a breach so significant it's already being referred to within palace walls as the parchment betrayal. For those who doubted the seriousness of King Charles's stance, the emergence of the royal decree eliminated any ambiguity. It was real, it was irreversible, and it was worded in a manner so precise and emotionally detached it rattled even the most seasoned royal historians. Printed on aged vellum, embossed with the royal arms and encased in a deep burgundy scroll case, the document was unlike any modern royal communication. Unlike statements issued by the Royal Communications Office, which are polished with diplomacy and often riddled with vagueness, this decree had the solemnity and finality of a legal judgment. It was not addressed to the public, nor to Harry directly. Instead, it was circulated internally within the royal household, sent to the Lord Chamberlain's office, the keeper of the privy purse, and the heads of all constitutional archives. In short, it was treated not as a press release, but as a matter of royal history. The wording of the decree, as leaked by a whistleblower close to the Privy Council, is stark, elegant, and devastating. Its most quoted line, now making headlines across the globe, reads, "The crown cannot be associated with betrayal, falsehood, or disloyalty. In the interest of the monarchy's stability, integrity, and future, the House of Windsor shall move forward without the Duke of Sussex in the line of succession." That single paragraph, positioned near the middle of the decree, has been examined by scholars, legal analysts, and palace insiders with the precision of a forensic team dissecting a will. But while the content of the sentence has drawn the most attention, its placement is just as telling. It follows a preamble that outlines the king's obligations to the realm and precedes a section detailing the reordering of the line of succession, formally removing Prince Harry's position and excluding his descendants as well. Nowhere in the document is the word disinherit used directly, nor does it contain emotional phrases such as with regret or with sorrow. It is dry. It is formal. It is the language of legacy, not emotion. And that, perhaps, is what makes it so powerful. This is not a father punishing a son. This is a monarch making a permanent correction to the royal architecture. According to legal experts on constitutional monarchy, the phrasing is deliberate. The document avoids modern legal terms that could invite judicial review, instead relying on historical precedents and sovereign authority. In other words, the king used the ancient, unquestionable power of the crown, a power that predates Parliament and cannot be reversed without another royal act or constitutional amendment. And yet, the decree does more than just strike a name. It redefines the monarchy's expectations for those who bear the royal bloodline. Traditionally, being born a royal came with obligations: public service, privacy, and loyalty. But over time, particularly with the rise of global media and personal branding, those obligations began to blur. With Harry's departure and subsequent media ventures, the line between private citizen and royal representative evaporated. The decree restores that line in no uncertain terms. If one cannot live by the monarchy's values, one cannot remain tied to its destiny. This has enormous implications not just for Harry, but for the royal family's future model. For decades, the Windsors have grappled with the question of how to remain relevant in a modern world. The Queen, in her wisdom, understood the need for careful evolution, never radical, but always purposeful. Charles, inheriting both the throne and the burden of generational change, seems to be saying with this decree that the monarchy must now be sharper, more self-protective, and less tolerant of internal dissonance. Several analysts have noted the decree's curious lack of language around love, forgiveness, or hope for reconciliation. For a family so often accused of being emotionally distant, one might expect at least a symbolic gesture of empathy. But there is none. This is not a document of feelings. It is a document of action, and it leaves no room for ambiguity. It also includes, in one of its final sections, a chilling declaration: the title of Duke of Sussex, as originally bestowed by Her late Majesty, shall henceforth bear symbolic relevance only, without ceremonial or governmental utility, and shall not be exercised in a manner that reflects or implies continued constitutional standing. This effectively turns Harry's title into a shell, a name without weight, a relic of what once was. It does not strip the title outright, likely to avoid a legal or political firestorm, but it renders it powerless in all formal contexts. What makes this even more complex is the silence that followed its leak. The king has made no public statement. Buckingham Palace has issued no denial, no confirmation, no clarification. When asked by reporters for comment, a senior royal press officer simply replied, "We do not comment on matters of internal succession." That silence, for those who understand royal codes, is a resounding confirmation. Even more intriguing is the reaction behind the scenes. According to sources within the royal archives, the document has already been filed within the restricted succession vaults, a chamber located deep beneath Windsor Castle where only the most sensitive royal legal documents are stored. That vault has not been updated in nearly 2 decades, not since the passing of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The addition of Charles's decree suggests its permanence. This is not a temporary disciplinary measure. This is a redrawing of the future. It's also worth noting what the decree does not say. It makes no mention of Meghan Markle by name. It does not discuss Archie or Lilibet in any detail. But by removing Harry from the line of succession, the implications are clear. His children, born of his line, are excluded by proxy. Though some legal analysts argue that their positions were already tenuous given their place outside of Britain and lack of royal duties, this decree cements their exclusion without ever directly attacking them. Some royal commentators have referred to this approach as surgical cruelty, a method that achieves total removal while avoiding overt hostility. It's a technique the Crown has used before, most notably in the quiet removal of certain former royals from public life without public scandal. Yet in Harry's case, the move feels more like a reckoning than a repositioning. He is not being set aside. He is being erased from the future. And still, for all its institutional power, the decree has an emotional weight that cannot be ignored. It marks the formal end of a long, painful journey between a father and his son. From the innocence of childhood walks through Kensington Gardens to the public displays of unity at the funeral of Princess Diana, the bond between Charles and Harry was never absent of affection. But affection, it seems, was not enough. There are those who will see this decree as overreach, a monarch punishing a son for seeking a different path. But others, especially those within the royal institution, view it as a necessary correction. A bold assertion that the monarchy is not a soap opera or a brand. It is a sacred institution, one that demands loyalty above personal ambition. As the world continues to digest the document's contents, one thing is abundantly clear. King Charles has not just signed a piece of parchment. He has signed the end of an era. The Sussex chapter of royal history is closed. And what remains now is the story of a prince who chose freedom and a king who chose order. In a family where every gesture is scrutinized and every silence speaks volumes, the most revealing reaction to King Charles's historic decree may not have been the outcry from Meghan Markle or even the rumored distress from Prince Harry himself. It was the deliberate, calculated quiet of Prince William. The future king, often described as stoic, dutiful, and unwavering in his loyalty to the institution, offered no public comment. No statement of support, no message of condolence, no acknowledgement whatsoever. But within the royal system, his silence was anything but neutral. Those closest to the situation have confirmed that Prince William was not only aware of the decree long before it was drafted, he was consulted throughout the process. Senior royal aides suggest that Charles, cautious not to alienate his heir, made sure that William was in alignment with the decision. In truth, there was never much doubt. The brothers had been drifting apart for years. The damage had already been done, but now William appeared to view the situation not as personal fallout, but as necessary royal housekeeping. For William, this was not merely about a family feud. It was about preserving the dignity and credibility of the crown he will one day inherit. According to insiders, the Prince of Wales expressed concern as far back as 2021 that Harry's actions, particularly the Oprah interview, had crossed a line that put the monarchy's integrity in jeopardy. While Charles was still trying to navigate the fallout with compassion and patience, William had reportedly reached his own quiet verdict. The monarchy could not afford Harry any longer. This judgment did not come easily. The relationship between William and Harry had once been one of the strongest in the family. Born 2 years apart, they were raised in the shadow of royal expectation and tragedy. The death of their mother, Diana, forged a bond between them that few outsiders could understand. They shared grief, secrets, jokes, and pressure. As boys, they were often inseparable. As young men, they stood united in service and in duty. But as adults, the paths they chose diverged in every way. William, trained from birth to be king, accepted the constraints of monarchy as a matter of responsibility. He married within royal expectations, took on more duties, and embraced the sober image of the crown's future. Harry, always more impulsive, increasingly rejected the limitations of royal life, seeking meaning and autonomy beyond the palace walls. That divergence wasn't just ideological, it became deeply personal. According to those close to the family, the breaking point between the brothers came not during the infamous Oprah interview, but years earlier. When Harry began to distrust palace advisors, complain about favoritism, and allegedly accuse William of using him as a shield for bad press. Tensions flared behind closed doors, with one insider describing their interactions as chess games of passive aggression. When Harry left the royal fold in 2020, William reportedly felt blindsided. He wasn't just losing a brother, he was losing an ally. That sense of betrayal only deepened when Harry and Meghan aired their grievances in public. Accusations of racism within the family, claims that Meghan was driven to suicidal thoughts by palace neglect, and suggestions that unnamed royals had questioned their children's skin tone. All of these claims were broadcast to millions. And while the names were left out, speculation inevitably fell on William and Charles. William was livid. Though he would never say so publicly, his fury was evident in his clipped responses to press questions and his visible frustration during public engagements. Still, he maintained the palace code of silence. Even as Meghan's podcast threw shade at the institution, even as Harry's memoir portrayed him as cold, condescending, and even physically abusive, William said nothing. But silence, in the royal world, can be louder than speeches. And now, with the revelation of the royal decree, that silence has finally revealed its purpose. Multiple palace aides have confirmed that William not only supported the decision to remove Harry from the line of succession, he was relieved. One aide described him as tired of waiting for the next bombshell. For William, every month that passed without royal intervention risked further erosion of the monarchy's global image. He saw Harry's campaign not just as a personal vendetta, but as a threat to the institution both of them were born into. And while William may have once hoped for reconciliation, those hopes faded with each new public revelation. Some close to William say his calm exterior masks deep sadness. Despite the betrayal he feels, he still mourns the loss of the relationship they once had. He doesn't celebrate Harry's downfall, but he has accepted it. A source close to Kensington Palace stated, William isn't vindictive, but he is resolute. He believes in the monarchy above all. And if that means distancing himself from Harry permanently, he's already made peace with it. Others believe William's silence is a tactical move. By saying nothing, he allows the focus to remain on Charles. He doesn't want to be seen as the enforcer, but neither does he want to soften the blow. He understands the optics. If he speaks out in support of the decision, it could look like sibling rivalry elevated to constitutional sabotage. If he speaks out against it, it could undermine the king's authority. So he says nothing. He doesn't have to. The crown has already spoken. The ramifications of William's silence go beyond family politics. Among royal watchers and political commentators, there is growing speculation that William's support of the decree signals a shift in the future of the monarchy. A monarchy under William may not be as forgiving, as tolerant of internal dissent. Some call it a modernizing instinct, a desire to streamline the royal family and avoid emotional entanglements. Others see it as a hardening of the institution's heart. In public, William continues to fulfill his duties with precision. He appears at hospitals, schools, military bases, a picture of composure and commitment. But behind the scenes, he is now seen as the quiet architect of a more pragmatic monarchy. One where loyalty is valued more than lineage. One where even a prince can be removed if he poses too great a risk. Critics argue that this approach lacks humanity. That William, in his drive to protect the crown, has become cold. But supporters argue the opposite. That he is showing the kind of discipline and clarity required of a future king. that he is learning from the chaos of his youth, from the mistakes of the past, and ensuring they are not repeated. There is also the matter of his children. William's 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, represent the monarchy's next generation. By supporting the removal of Harry from the line of succession, William is clearing a path for them that is unburdened by scandal and confusion. He is protecting their future. Some even suggest that the decision was not just about the present, but about 20 years from now, when George steps into his own role. But perhaps the most striking aspect of William's position is this. It marks the first time he has truly acted independently of Harry. For years, their identities were intertwined. The heirs, the brothers, the bond of Diana's sons. Now, for the first time, William is standing fully alone as a future monarch, making decisions not as a sibling, but as a steward of the monarchy. And in doing so, he has revealed a truth that has long been hidden behind palace gates, that in the world of royalty, blood is not always thicker than duty. When the contents of the royal decree were leaked and then confirmed by mounting silence from Buckingham Palace, the news didn't just ripple across the globe, it detonated inside the Sussex household. According to multiple insiders who claim close proximity to Montecito's inner circle, Meghan Markle's reaction was neither muted nor composed. Far from it. One person described the scene with 5 sharp words. She screamed through the walls. The moment she read the decree's core line, that the crown could no longer be associated with betrayal, falsehood, or disloyalty, sources say Meghan interpreted it as a direct and personal attack on her character, not just Harry's. She was said to have stormed into the kitchen of their California estate, knocking over a ceramic dish, reportedly repeating the phrase, "unbelievable," under her breath over and over, until her voice rose to a thunderous, "He has no right." Those 5 words now echo louder than anything she has said publicly in months. There was no live Instagram reaction, no immediate legal filing, no composed podcast rebuttal. Instead, according to a Montecito neighbor and a staff member who allegedly heard the incident unfold, the Duchess of Sussex became emotionally unglued. She felt blindsided, betrayed, and humiliated not just by Charles, but by what she saw as a coordinated act of exclusion that painted her as the shadow figure behind the downfall of a prince. Meghan has always believed the royal family underestimated her influence, her power to shape narratives, a Hollywood publicist familiar with her media team stated. But this time, she wasn't prepared. She thought Charles might publicly reprimand Harry. She didn't think he'd go this far. This sense of shock wasn't limited to Meghan herself. Her team of attorneys, PR strategists, and brand consultants were reportedly summoned within the hour. The core question dominating that impromptu crisis meeting was twofold. Should they retaliate publicly? And could the king's move be challenged legally? Early murmurs suggested Meghan was furious enough to consider a high-profile televised sit-down, one that could match or even outdo the impact of their 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey. However, those plans were quickly shelved, not because she didn't want to speak, but because her team, multiple insiders report, advised her that public sympathy had waned since the earlier years of the Megxit exodus. What once played as defiance now risked appearing vindictive. Still, Meghan's alleged fury wasn't confined to the loss of status or succession. It was the message behind it. The implication that she and her children had no claim, no legitimacy, no connection to the institution from which they once descended. In the hours following the leak, Meghan was reportedly overheard saying, "He's erased my children with a pen stroke." For a woman who had fought so publicly to secure royal recognition for Archie and Lilibet, this decree wasn't just a political blow. It was personal, maternal, and existential. Back in 2021, Meghan openly discussed how troubled she was that Archie was denied the title of prince. At the time, she framed it as a matter of racial bias, institutional coldness, and a breach of tradition. Her defense was emotional and fierce. Every child deserves dignity, she argued, not based on birthright, but humanity. Now, the king's decree doesn't simply withhold titles. It severs royal bloodline recognition entirely. Her children, though biologically descended from royalty, will never be considered royal in the eyes of the crown. In the Montecito mansion, a place once filled with aspirations of reforming the monarchy from the outside, the mood reportedly turned into something close to despair. Not only had their bridge back to royal legitimacy been burned, but it was done so without their consent, and seemingly without regard for the emotional or psychological consequences. One close contact claims Meghan told a friend that night, "They've declared war on my family. They just haven't used the word yet." It's important to understand the wider psychological context of Meghan's reaction. Much of her personal narrative, both in her media appearances and philanthropic branding, has been built on the theme of being silenced, misunderstood, and underestimated. Whether appearing on talk shows, giving interviews, or producing content under the Archwell banner, she consistently positions herself as someone who broke free from a toxic system. Now, with this decree, the monarchy has taken the final word. In the most official, irreversible manner. Some insiders suggest that Meghan is not only livid but also scared. Not for her safety, but for her narrative. Up until now, she's been able to counter royal media with her own voice, controlling her message through carefully selected platforms and sympathetic journalists. But this time, there's a signed royal decree, a piece of history that can't be edited, reframed, or reinterpreted. She can respond, but she can't undo. And that, for someone so deeply invested in image and legacy, is deeply unsettling. To make matters more volatile, Meghan reportedly believes that this move by King Charles was not made in isolation. In private, she's alleged to have named Prince William, Kate Middleton, and even Camilla as co-conspirators. They never wanted us to succeed, she supposedly said during the aftermath. They've been plotting our erasure since we landed in California. Whether true or not, this reveals how Meghan sees the monarchy. Not as a family fractured by circumstance, but as an organized institution that conspired to shut her out permanently. This belief was further inflamed by the manner in which the decree was leaked. Rather than being issued formally through the usual Buckingham Palace press channels, it emerged like a shadow document, sourced by royal insiders, verified quietly by journalists, and never denied by the palace. To Meghan, this signals a strategic ambush. The Crown spoke without lifting its voice. In the days following the leak, Meghan's team reportedly began exploring legal avenues. Not to challenge the monarchy's sovereign right to alter the succession, which is legally airtight, but to argue that the language in the decree could constitute reputational damage. Some lawyers are said to be examining whether the phrasing, particularly the reference to falsehood and betrayal, opens the door to defamation suits, especially in the United States, where libel laws differ from those in the UK. But even here, legal experts are skeptical. You can't sue a sovereign for exercising sovereign authority, one US-based constitutional scholar stated. You can respond in the court of public opinion, but not in courtrooms. And so, Meghan finds herself boxed in, legally cornered, publicly overshadowed, and emotionally charged. What once felt like a media chess match now feels like a checkmate. Publicly, she has yet to issue a statement. But her silence, like William's, speaks volumes. Her close associates, speaking off the record, describe her current state as a mixture of fury and calculation. She's reportedly exploring options for a narrative counterstrike. Not immediately, but in the form of a future book, docuseries, or high-profile sit-down. Whatever comes, it will be crafted carefully, with a tone designed to reclaim victimhood without triggering public fatigue. Meanwhile, the Montecito estate remains under heightened privacy. Security has increased. Staff rotations have changed. No new content has been announced through Archwell. In short, the Sussex machine is quiet, not because it's paralyzed, but because it's recalibrating. If anything is certain, it's that Meghan is not likely to forgive or forget this, nor will she let it slide. Her track record shows a woman who, when cornered, returns with force, not recklessly, but surgically. The question is not whether Meghan will respond. It's how long she'll wait, and how hard she'll hit when she does. When the royal decree stripped Prince Harry of his succession rights, its impact reached beyond a single man. It extended silently but definitively to the two young children many believe have been caught between two worlds since birth, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. In the shadows of palatial politics, their names, though never directly mentioned in the decree, have effectively vanished from the future royal tapestry. No royal confirmation. No formal recognition. No HRH styles. No place in line for the throne. The monarchy's message was implicit but unmistakable. The lineage ends here. For many, the heart of this issue is not just constitutional, it is deeply human. Archie and Lilibet are not political pawns or legal terms on a scroll. They are children, young, unknowing, and entirely innocent of the decisions made by their parents. And yet, with one pen stroke from their grandfather, their place in the institution that once embraced their bloodline has been severed. There was no ceremony, no explanation, and no allowance for nuance. The monarchy, in an unspoken but undeniable move, closed the door. This outcome carries profound implications, not just for the royal family, but for how legacy, blood, and belonging are defined in the modern age. Archie and Lilibet were born into a unique convergence of American celebrity and British aristocracy. Their mother, a biracial American actress with global ambitions, had already begun to redefine the public's understanding of royal identity. Their father, the so-called spare-turned-outsider, was a symbol of royal rebellion. Their births, then, were expected to signal something revolutionary, a modern generation of royals who could bridge the chasm between ancient tradition and contemporary diversity. But that promise has collapsed. In its place is uncertainty, legal, emotional, and symbolic. Following the decree, several high-level constitutional experts began dissecting what the removal of Prince Harry from the line of succession means for his children. Technically, because succession is determined not only by birthright but also by position within the active royal family, once Harry was removed from the line, his descendants became legally irrelevant to the throne. In plainer terms, no father, no path. Archie and Lilibet, despite their Windsor blood, are no longer part of the institutional future of the monarchy. This doesn't just affect succession. It affects recognition. In March 2023, after Queen Elizabeth's death, there was a brief moment when Archie and Lilibet were listed on the official royal website as Prince and Princess, in accordance with rules set forth by King George V over a century ago. It caused an international stir. Supporters saw it as overdue justice. Critics called it inappropriate, given Harry and Meghan's ongoing attacks on the monarchy. Now, with this decree, those titles are rendered meaningless. Even if retained socially or in media appearances, they carry no institutional weight. They are, at best, honorary, at worst, obsolete. Sources inside Buckingham Palace have confirmed that the children's titles are being reviewed for removal from the royal website, and that future ceremonial documents will not reference them. This decision isn't merely administrative. It signals a formal reshaping of royal identity and inheritance. It makes clear that the monarchy will not extend its shield to those who exist outside its duties, even if they carry royal blood. For Meghan, this is a deeply painful blow. During her interview with Oprah, she emphasized her fear that her children would be unprotected, physically and symbolically, by a monarchy that appeared willing to leave them in limbo. She fought not for power, she claimed, but for principle, equal dignity for her children. Now, that dignity has been denied by omission. In private conversations, Meghan is said to have expressed anguish not just for the present, but for the future. What will Archie and Lilibet think when they're older and see what happened? What will they feel, knowing their cousins George, Charlotte, and Louis hold status and place, while they do not? Will they see it as rejection, as racism, as political consequence, or as a symptom of a family war in which they were simply born on the wrong battlefield? Prince Harry, too, reportedly struggled with the implications of the decree for his children. Though often combative in his public remarks, those close to him say he is gutted by what this means for Archie's and Lilibet's connection to his mother, Princess Diana. He had hoped they would carry that lineage not only biologically, but ceremonially. Now, that hope is gone. The children will not walk in royal processions. They will not attend official palace events. Their names will not be called in future succession briefings. For all official purposes, they are private citizens of the United States. And yet, the confusion doesn't stop there. With their ambiguous standing, questions arise about security, inheritance, and future access to royal resources. Previously, there was speculation that the children might be entitled to limited security benefits or symbolic trust entitlements, depending on the crown's stance. Now, all such avenues appear blocked. Palace officials reportedly confirmed that the decree's reach effectively cancels any remaining discussion around financial or ceremonial obligations for Archie and Lilibet. They are, in every meaningful sense, on their own. This opens the door to a broader question, one that sits uncomfortably in the air. What does it mean to belong to a family that no longer acknowledges you? For many observers, this latest chapter reveals the monarchy's internal coldness when faced with emotional complexity. Rather than extend a grace period for the children or acknowledge their unique circumstances, the institution chose clarity. That clarity, though politically clean, feels to many like abandonment. Public sentiment is equally divided. Some believe that by stepping away from royal duties and launching media attacks on the crown, Harry and Meghan forfeited any right to future inclusion. Others argue that the children, blameless in all of this, should have been granted a protected status, if not for title, then for heritage. As one British columnist wrote, "A monarchy that cannot protect its youngest descendants from institutional exile has lost more than just tradition, it's lost its humanity." Social media has also erupted with heated debate. Hashtags like #JusticeForArchie and #ForgottenRoyals began trending within hours of the decree's leak. In contrast, others posted under #TheyWalkedAway, implying that the Sussexes made their choice and should now live with its consequences. But for Archie and Lilibet, none of these hashtags matter. They are too young to understand what has occurred, too young to grasp the scale of legacy, the weight of history, or the bitterness of royal power plays. Their story, or at least their perception of it, will be shaped not by titles or decrees, but by what they're told in the years to come. That responsibility falls squarely on Harry and Meghan. Will they raise their children with pride in their royal heritage, or in bitterness toward the family that rejected them? Will they portray Charles as a loving grandfather caught in political currents, or as a cold ruler who exiled his own grandchildren? These are not just parenting decisions. They are narrative choices. And given Meghan's emphasis on storytelling through interviews, documentaries, and public appearances, it's likely that the version of this saga the children inherit will be carefully crafted. But there's one final, haunting reality. Even if one day Archie or Lilibet wanted to return to the royal family, to serve, to reconnect, to belong, the door may no longer exist. The decree, as worded, leaves no space for future restoration. It is not a suspension. It is a closure. And while public sentiment might shift and monarchs might change, the document itself becomes part of royal history, permanent, archived, irreversible. So now, two young children, born of palace and Hollywood, of duty and rebellion, grow up far from the world their father once called home. Their titles are gone, their place in the royal order erased. All that remains is a name, Sussex, and a question that may follow them for life. Were they erased for who they were born as, or for what their parents chose to become? As the royal decree detonated like a thunderclap across the United Kingdom, the reverberations were equally deafening in the court of public opinion. But while Buckingham Palace remained encased in dignified silence, its counterpart across the Atlantic, the Sussex camp, began bracing for yet another storm. This wasn't just a familial fracture or a constitutional reshuffle. It was a media war, a full-scale narrative battle playing out across headlines, social media platforms, podcasts, and whisper networks and glossy celebrity circles. And at the center of this chaos stood two rival brands, the monarchy and the Sussexes, tradition versus disruption. Historically, the monarchy has always held a distinct advantage in moments of crisis, institutional silence. It is not reactive, and it never debates in the open. Its strength lies in mystique, in rituals older than the internet, and in a centuries-old playbook of controlled appearances and quiet corrections. In contrast, the Sussex model operates on immediacy, emotion, and the manipulation of personal narrative. Where the palace retreats into quiet corridors, Harry and Meghan take to cameras, microphones, and social media allies. But this time, the dynamic felt different. With the release of the royal decree, the monarchy didn't just rely on silence, it deployed precision. By allowing the leak to speak for itself without official confirmation or denial, Buckingham Palace ensured the story would grow organically, driven by the public and press rather than official spin. It was a subtle act of dominance, letting the Sussexes wrestle with the fallout while refusing to engage directly. Meghan's usual strategy of controlling the narrative, a well-timed interview, a podcast episode hinting at internal trauma, a joint statement with carefully crafted language, failed to arrive in the immediate aftermath. And that absence itself became a story. For the first time, the Sussexes appeared unsure. Not just surprised, but disarmed. Their silence felt less like strategy and more like a pause born out of genuine disbelief. In response, media coverage exploded on both sides of the Atlantic. British outlets such as The Telegraph, The Times, and the Daily Mail led with words like exile, erased, and banished, framing the move as a historic decision by a monarch who had finally drawn a line in the sand. Meanwhile, U.S. outlets took a softer tone. People magazine, The New York Times, and Vanity Fair focused on Meghan's emotional reaction and questioned whether the monarchy had gone too far. American headlines used phrases like a painful severance and the crown's coldest decision yet. Then came the commentary class. Royal biographers, PR experts, and media strategists were rolled out across networks like BBC, CNN, and Sky News to offer analysis. Some called the decree an act of courage by King Charles. Others labeled it vindictive and archaic. Yet nearly all agreed on one thing. This was the final break. There was no path back for Harry and Meghan. What emerged over the next 72 hours was a coordinated response, not directly from the Sussexes themselves, but from a constellation of allied voices. A former Archewell employee anonymously told a Los Angeles-based journalist that the couple felt ambushed, accusing the monarchy of planting the story in time for Charles's next public appearance, ensuring maximum press deflection. Another source close to Meghan reportedly said she saw this as a declaration of war, warning that what the Crown has done in secret, we will answer in the open. But the Sussexes were facing a different kind of media terrain this time. The public mood had shifted. In 2020 and 2021, Harry and Meghan's revelations had drawn widespread empathy, particularly in America. The racism allegations, the mental health disclosures, and the image of an institution cold to a grieving couple resonated deeply with a global audience. But now, 3 years into their post-royal life, the couple's tone had begun to wear thin. Netflix fatigue, memoir overexposure, perceived victimhood. Some media analysts suggested that the Sussex brand had reached a saturation point. They told their story, one commentator said, but the more they talked, the more people started asking, when does healing begin, and blame end. The problem wasn't necessarily their message. It was the frequency and intensity of it. Archewell, initially envisioned as a philanthropic engine, had become more of a storytelling platform, a media machine driven by personal anecdotes, relitigated traumas, and polished grief. As a result, their ability to reclaim narrative space after the decree was severely diminished. The public wasn't uninterested, they were exhausted. Even sympathetic media outlets began to show signs of detachment. A notable example came from The Guardian, where a columnist wrote, "Perhaps what the Sussexes need now isn't another platform. It's a pause, reflection, a step away from the camera." Another in The Atlantic questioned whether the couple's obsession with monarchy had become their brand's unintended prison. In this weakened media position, the Sussexes' usual tactics had less force. Their PR team floated stories about Meghan potentially pursuing new acting roles, launching a new podcast, or producing children's content, all intended to change the conversation. But the coverage remained fixated on the decree. Even entertainment outlets like TMZ and Page Six focused on what it meant for Archie and Lilibet rather than any creative new venture. Meanwhile, the palace played its cards with masterful restraint. Charles made no statement but appeared at 2 public engagements, one at a children's hospital, the other at an environmental summit. In both cases, he smiled, greeted onlookers, and avoided press questions. William, too, remained silent but was photographed reading to schoolchildren in East London. The photos went viral, not because of what was said, but because of what was not. The monarchy was projecting stability. A message, we carry on. The contrast could not have been more striking. On one side, a media empire under siege, attempting to regroup. On the other, a royal institution reclaiming control not through words, but through unshakable presence. Even Camilla, often maligned in the press, benefited from the moment. Her recent literary charity gala was praised by royal watchers for its calm dignity. The Queen Consort, once a tabloid villain, now embodied grace under pressure, a metaphor for the monarchy itself. As the media battle raged, an interesting pattern emerged. Public opinion began to crystallize not around sympathy, but around finality. People were tired of the war, tired of the family feud, tired of hearing conflicting accounts of who said what, when, and why. Polls showed that while many believed Harry and Meghan had been mistreated, an even larger portion believed that now, with the decree in place, it was time for both sides to move on. This sentiment has major implications, because in media, perception shapes opportunity. The Sussexes, once the darlings of the progressive press, were now facing cautious skepticism. The monarchy, long thought to be out of touch, was quietly reclaiming moral high ground by doing the unthinkable, not responding. By the end of the week, media framing had taken a decisive turn. Harry and Meghan were not painted as victims. They were framed as exiles, cut off, left to chart their path. And whether deserved or not, that label stuck. They were no longer rebels. They were outsiders. And so the media war that had defined the Sussex narrative since 2020 has entered a new phase, not of escalation, but of silence, of repositioning, of carefully chosen exits. The decree didn't just end their royal claim. It neutralized their ability to keep that claim alive through the media. Now, the question isn't what they'll say next. It's whether anyone still wants to hear it. The British public has always had a complicated relationship with its monarchy, reverent in tradition, yet increasingly critical in the age of transparency and global accountability. But nothing could have prepared the United Kingdom for the emotional collision that erupted in the wake of King Charles's royal decree disowning Prince Harry and removing him from the line of succession. The reaction was immediate, polarizing, and explosive. And unlike previous royal controversies, this one did not center on speculation or media hearsay. It centered on an actual document, a historic and unprecedented declaration that fundamentally redrew the boundaries of royal legitimacy. Outside Buckingham Palace, the mood was not one of quiet reflection, but of impassioned debate. Within hours of the leak, protesters began gathering, holding signs that captured both sides of the national divide. One sign read, "Protect the crown, end the chaos." Another, equally bold, said, "Fathers don't disown sons." The chants were not violent, but they were loud, and they marked a return to the kind of public emotion not seen since the death of Princess Diana, when the nation's grief had turned into fury over royal detachment. This time, the monarchy wasn't facing grief. It was facing judgment. Across London, opinion polls flashed on television screens and digital tickers. ITV ran a live segment gauging public sentiment, while the BBC offered a special late-night discussion panel featuring royal historians, sociologists, and legal experts. By the end of that 24-hour period, the numbers spoke clearly. 52% of Britons supported King Charles's decision, 31% opposed it, and 17% were undecided or indifferent. On paper, it looked like the majority backed the king. But beneath the surface, something more fractured was taking shape. In older demographics, especially those over 55, the support for the monarchy's move was even stronger. Many expressed sentiments like, "It had to be done," or "You can't betray the family and expect to be treated like royalty." One man interviewed outside a cafe in Devon said, "We've given Harry enough leeway. He made his bed. He chose his wife and his fame over duty. Now he can live with that." However, among younger generations, particularly those under 35, the mood was different. More than half believed the monarchy had gone too far. They saw the move not as protective, but punitive. "You don't fix a broken family by cutting someone off," said a university student in Birmingham. "This isn't tradition. It's petty revenge." Social media platforms reflected this divide even more starkly. TikTok videos critiquing the monarchy's coldness amassed millions of views, while Twitter became a battleground of hashtags. Hashtag shame on the crown versus hashtag support King Charles. In multicultural neighborhoods, particularly in cities like London, Manchester, and Liverpool, there was also a noticeable uptick in conversations about race, identity, and belonging. For many people of color in Britain, Meghan Markle had once symbolized a chance for the royal family to evolve, to modernize, to reflect the diversity of the modern Commonwealth. Her marriage to Harry wasn't just romantic, it was political. And now, in their eyes, the decree was not just a rejection of Harry's behavior, it was a rejection of the new face the monarchy had once claimed to embrace. Community leaders in East London voiced concerns that the monarchy had closed a door on any pretense of inclusion. When Meghan joined the royal family, it felt like something had shifted, like our country's history was finally catching up to its people, said a local councilwoman. Now, it feels like that door wasn't just shut. It was slammed in our faces. Still, not everyone was rushing to declare the monarchy out of touch. In fact, many constitutional traditionalists saw the decree as an overdue act of leadership. What Charles has done is send a message that being a royal is not a license to attack the institution from within, said a royal commentator on Sky News. You can't live off the brand while trying to burn it down. That's not freedom. That's sabotage. Tabloids, naturally, played their part in shaping public emotion. The Daily Mail's front page screamed, "The Crown strikes back," while The Sun published a scathing editorial calling Prince Harry a spoiled rebel who had finally reaped the consequences of his choices. In contrast, The Guardian and The Independent took a more analytical tone, questioning whether the move might ultimately backfire by alienating younger Britons who already view the monarchy as archaic. Meanwhile, Local pubs and coffee shops buzzed with conversations, many of them layered with emotion and family analogies. "What would you do if your son aired your private business to the world?" asked one man in a pub in Nottingham. "There's got to be a line somewhere." Another patron fired back. "But would you disown him completely? Would you punish the grandkids too?" Indeed, one of the most poignant public conversations emerged around the fate of Archie and Lilibet. The general sentiment, even among many who supported the king's move, was that the children had been treated unfairly. Radio call-in shows were flooded with voices expressing concern that the monarchy had allowed its feud with Harry and Meghan to spill over into innocent generations. One caller asked, "Is the monarchy really so fragile that it can't find space for a toddler and a baby?" Across churches, schools, and family dinner tables, the conversation deepened. Not just about royalty, but about forgiveness, loyalty, and how families navigate betrayal. This wasn't just a royal story anymore. It was a national mirror, a reflection of how Britain sees family, power, tradition, and what it means to belong. Politically, the reaction was measured but notable. No sitting MP came out explicitly against the king's decision, but there were murmurs of concern within the Labour Party, particularly among its younger members. One backbencher told a reporter anonymously, "This just shows how out of step the palace is with modern Britain. The people want transparency, compassion, not cold-blooded decrees." Meanwhile, members of the Conservative Party applauded the king's action as decisive leadership during a time of institutional erosion. Perhaps the most striking moment came not from politicians or pundits, but from a spontaneous public act. Outside Kensington Palace, someone placed two handmade signs on the gates. One read, "A family divided is a nation uncertain." The other, smaller but just as powerful, said, "You were born a prince, and still are in our eyes." These signs were removed within hours by palace security, but not before thousands of photos were taken, shared, and debated. The royal family may not answer to votes or popularity polls, but they do exist under the scrutiny of public faith. And with this decree, Charles has tested that faith. Some see him as a bold reformer, willing to place the institution above emotion. Others see him as a monarch who allowed pride to override compassion. For now, the crown stands unshaken, but the conversation it sparked has only begun.